since mites became a big problem and beekeepers were going through a lots of changes in their management, it was like as everybody was thinking, give me the product, tell me exactly how should I use it, and we will apply it. And most of the common question at the time, everybody wants to have calendar date. Tell me exactly what week, what day, even what time of the day I can apply my products. And apparently, like as we discussed this morning, when we give talks, and everybody has his own environment and his location and even micro environment. Right now, even the internet, it has become a common place or common domain for everybody. We go into discussion groups. Like right now, I've been in this BL for about, 25 years. And you can find some people from Argentina, New Zealand, Europe, every place around the world talking about bees. At the same time, one guy says, well, I'm treating my bees right now. At the same time, somebody in Alberta is making honey, and say, well, that's not the right time of the year. But if you know where this guy is from, you can understand that's off season for this guy. I was giving a talk, and I invited Larry Connor to give a talk. I'm sure most of you knows who is Larry Connor. And as I'm giving my talk, and he was looking at the whole system in Alberta, and he said, Medhat, are you trying to change the beekeepers' behavior? They are always behind. We're supposed to start at 1 o'clock, it's now 1:15, and that's even reasonable time. And he said, oh, are you trying to make this what you call a proactive beekeeping? I said, yes, sir. And actually, at that time, I started using it as proactive beekeeping. We have to stay ahead of the bees and ahead of the mites at all times. So, having said that, regardless, if it is raining outside right now, that means the pollens were washed off, nectar washed off. However, inside the hive as a cluster, the temperature is still that 33 Celsius or 104, 105. The bees maintaining it, everything is developing inside the hive. That's why they store pollen and honey. So life is going on inside the box, but outside they're not really reflecting what's happening inside the hive. So we have to be aware of this kind of dynamics inside the box, and we have to act based on what we see inside the box. So I start, okay, if that's the case, what's happening here? Okay. Going through the 2006, as I said, we went through a lot of hardship, and definitely everybody was blaming themselves. What did I do? And what should I do? Should I stay in this business or look for something else? Knowing the beekeepers, it's almost like, in a way, it's not only a business for themselves, but a hobby is part of their life. If you ask them to go and change career, no way they are going to do it. But everybody at that time, during that crisis, was kind of willing to change and find a way how to do it right. Actually, I grabbed on that momentum and start working with the guys. If we want to do it right, we need to start thinking about, I hate the fact some people think about out of the box. Because if you think out of the box, who designed the box and how big is its box? Just think about the beehive and what happened inside the hive. Don't make assumption from your head, but based on what you see inside the hive. So we start talking about those bee diseases. As I said, in 1990s, tracheal mite was the big thing. This is a bee yard out in Niagara area. You walk in, out of 6 hives, you find 4 hives or 5 are dead. Then you open the box, you see lots of honey. Later on, varroa mites came and took over, and we start seeing all of this mite wingless and deformed wings. People start to realize there is a serious problem changing here. Small hive beetle, it didn't take that long. Actually, this one from Art Gerber up near Buffalo area, and this is small hive beetle, and that was in almost 98, 99. So you guys have the small hive beetle because those guys, they go down to Florida, bring the bees, it's short distance. And actually, at that time, Art, I used to tease him all the time, and he said, Medhat, here is a frame for you, and lots of these ones are eggs, and later on the larvae, and we got all of these things. So I said, Art, there's a good job for you after you finish doing your business, and that is, you can go fishing, because you can use the grubs to do fly fishing. American foul brood, another thing, we talk about viruses, and I'm glad Jennifer, she gave a good talk about all of this kind of viruses we are dealing with. And I said the beekeeping is quite ugly right now. If you're coming to have good time and enjoy the bees, you have to be prepared to deal with the ugly side of our business. And that's how to stay ahead of the mites and the other diseases. One thing also I noticed about beekeepers, once we start talking about mites, everybody forgot about American foul brood because no researcher will get invitation to talk about American foul brood. That's why I spent this morning to talk about American foul brood. We start seeing big surge in the percentage of colonies infected with American foul brood because everybody thought having the mites, it already put the American foul brood out of business. It is not the case. So first options, and we noticed this in lots of places, we got Epistan in 1990, and everybody said, all the salesmen, 99% kill, and everybody was quite happy. Stick them inside the box, everything could be good. By 1998, mites developed resistance to Epistan, and it was not any surprise to the scientists, and we used to preach the beekeepers, be aware mites will develop resistance, but we never monitored for that because it's happening in the agriculture system every single day. Then we got the chick mite. Once we got the chick mite, I'll show you a little bit ad about it, and it's kind of fun because again the chick mite was very powerful product. Later on, we ended up with contamination more than what we needed. And okay. One of the things we have, yes, the antibiotics, we have the fumidil, but one of the things you notice here, we have a group of beekeepers from day one decided to use the active ingredient from miticides being used in crops, mixing it with Crisco or oil, put it in blue shop towels, the shop blue towels, whatever, throw it in the hives. And that became a problem. Definitely this one, it cost 5 to 10 cents. This one, it cost at the time $1.90, so everybody went this way. Regardless, more contamination, no consistency of the dose applied, and everybody doing it under the sun, but illegal. And we got trapped in some ways. Nobody can stop these guys from doing this practice. In fact, one of the things, as soon as I moved to Alberta, we did surveys. I made sure everybody aware your practice as good as your neighbor. And you know, beekeepers always curious. They go out and lift the lids, find out what's happening in the neighbor. I get phone call, Medhat. Actually, I have 2 guys. We know them by names, and I was not hesitant to report them. First time he got $5,000. Second time he got $30,000. But do you think he stopped? Not really. But still, at least now we created a responsible community to make sure everybody is aware of that. One thing also we did, one extra step. Actually, we published the names in the newspaper. So just to make sure this person, everybody aware of what he's doing wrong. It's not because we would like to put him down, because just we show responsibility towards our crop and our bees and how to deal with things. So that's the first option. We knew relying on chemicals all the time is not going to get good. It's not going to be the proper answer. So now the second options, we start talking about the IPM, Integrated Pest Management. Some people didn't like it because that means I'm going to be a farmer. I have to hire some kids to do scouting, which they do it every time. And later on, if the number of bugs reach that level, they are going to treat. And that's what we call it IPM. So with that proactive beekeeping, we said, okay, let's change it. I'm sure you heard about that terminology, pest-poor beekeeping management, especially when everything failed. Everybody start blaming themselves. I said, no, let's be a little bit optimistic. That's proactive beekeeping management, and be smart about it, monitor, and select the proper product to use it to keep your bees alive. I'm not using the same terminology as IPM. I'm not using anything. Beekeepers are beekeepers, but also we have become farmers, but we have to be educated about this one. So why? There is one thing we have noticed. 1998, we have one system failed. 2004, we have another system failed. That's a check mite. And now we have the EPIVAR, and all of us, we know there is a sunset date on that one because mites will develop resistance. That's why we have to stay ahead of the curve. In fact, in my lab right now, I have 12 people being hired just to think about the next step. What's going to be available to our guys, because we don't want what happened in 2006, what's so-called colony collapse disorder. To me, that's a failure of management system, is being blamed on a terminology it may or may not even exist. The last 10 years, we are not able to induce a colony to have that colony collapse disorder. We can see it, bees collapse, but why? We don't have all the data and the records to show us why. We can point fingers. I like the fact, one of my dear friends down in California, he said, Medhat, you point one finger at one thing, there's 3 pointing at yourself, but you never have records for yourself. But always you blame it on somebody else. So the system collapse. Now the second one, contamination of the environment. I'm not talking about global warming. I'm not talking about something else. The environment inside the box. Keep in mind, all of our chemicals, to be safe to the honey, we design it to be dissolved in the wax. So all of them, they are compatible with oil and wax. How often we replace our combs to reduce the level of contamination in the hives? Very little. Actually, at least now, it's not the same as a few years ago. Some guys will be sitting down. I inherited my hives from my grandfather, and we've been keeping them for 30 years. How often did you change the combs? Are we supposed to do that? Yes. So that's the kind of stuff we start hearing. So think about it. Bees now are working all the time on combs It has all of this gluey stuff and chemicals. And later on, you say the queen, there is high percentage of supersedure. Keep in mind, the queens, they like to have pristine environment so they can communicate with their workers. That's why they have the pheromones. Some of these pheromones actually will be spreading on the combs and all of the stuff. That's part of their communication. Can you imagine if we add all of this formic acid and essential oils in our hives to kill the mites, how that will interfere in that communication system between the queen and workers? So that's another thing we have to consider. The last part here, food safety. I love the fact everybody says, I think I have the next slide or not. This is safe honey, natural, but they never tell you what they use to produce the honey. That's something like, I trust you, so you. One of the things, as I said, in terms of collapse of control system, this one actually was an ad by Apistan company. And if you look at here, they said, oh, you have that many 9 mites. By the 3rd year, actually our mites being killed, and there's 3 mites left. And that gives you about 97% of the mites killed. I took the same graph and figures and turned it upside down. What happened to the 3 mites which survive the application? That means they have a system able to digest that miticide and survive. They keep breeding the way we talked about it early on, and later on we end up with mite population inside the colony immune to the product we are using. How long it takes that stuff in agriculture? One thing good about the bugs in agriculture, we can raise them in the laboratory, and instead of having in the field 3 generations a year, we can rear them indoors for about 10-15 generations, and we can predict when that product will fail after how many generations in the field. If it took them 20, divided by 3, so within 6 years. For honeybees, till today, we cannot raise artificially the varroa mites. And that's one of the most serious problems which any scientists are facing. You were laughing earlier on when I say I have my mite farm. Yes, I keep about 120 hives, and all the time we seed them with mites. And last year it was excellent crop. We did a lot of experiments. With winter came, we lost 80%. This year we bought about 200 hives, and believe it or not, we are seeding them at different rates because we need mites. I was talking to my staff yesterday when we are going to start doing the mite experiments. Medhat, the mite level is still low. So that's the kind of stuff we can not really determine when it's going to happen. Aaron and I, we've been talking, and he said, Medhat, do you think things stabilized? I said, no way, it's not going to happen. We are waiting for another catastrophic situation is going to happen. How soon? I said, I don't really know, but I know it's imminent, it's going to happen, because we are working with one product. How many of you following Be Informed surveys? Just to go back for the last, they've been doing it about 9 years now or 10. How many, there is a question, how many applications did you use to control varroa mites? The first couple of years or 3 years, it was 2 applications. The last couple of years now, they've been talking about 3 to 4 applications to keep the mites under control, to maintain or to achieve a proper colony kill, which is like 15% what you call it expected. So if we went with more repeated application, that means we are having hard time to control the mites. And that's a problem. So the other thing which is happening too, and you can blame it on colony collapse disorder. If I don't have time, instead of using 2 ounces in 1 pound of oil to do my treatment. Right now, we are using 6 ounces in 1 pound of oil. So you increase the concentration to kill the stuff, guys, so you can have a proper efficacy, but at the same time, you are killing more bees. As a matter of fact, in our lab, as we are testing right now, but that's under the laboratory conditions, the most toxic chemical to our bees under the lab conditions is imitraz, which we are using it right now in Epivar. But what's happening with imitraz, that strips you are using right now in the field is 3.3%, enough to kill the mites, but it does not cause damage to the bees. However, so in this case, you have to stay consistent. That's why you are saying 1 strip for every 5 frames of bees. Can you imagine if you are making that concussion and mixing all of the stuff together, and you know that first application it didn't work, next time, spice it up. Second time, spice it up. And that's where we are getting into this trouble. So, I like this ad. Actually, it was made by Man Lake. Remember this one? Finally, there is a way to fight the resistant movement because they put the chick mite, and Man Lake actually was the sole distributor of a chick mite. I met Man Lake, the old man, and I talked to him and I said, well, how long is it gonna last? He said, man, that's magic product, 99%. In my head, think about what's left, 1%. It didn't take 4 years. This product came 1998. The first time we discovered chromophos resistance in our operation, it was in Maine and New Jersey in 2002. I found it in one operation in New Jersey. At the time, I was working down there. Tony Jadzak from Maine, he found it there. So it didn't take 4 years. So now we have to think about these products and how the system works. I like this ad here. It says, in your hives, out of your mind. I thought, are you off your mind? And the most interesting part, guess what? No, everybody looked at the picture coming with the ad. You can see the boxes here, and look, is there any bees here? But that was all the time. The back page of American Bee Journal and Bee Cleaning and the Bee Culture, all the time. And I talked to these guys and I said, at least use a real picture like this one, so you know exactly how to apply them and how to use them, making sure also you are using the gloves for safety for the beekeepers. But I guess we listen, but we don't read. So having that stuff, I say, well, buzz off. We have to make sure our beekeepers understand how the system works so they can decide for themselves. A natural honey, I love the fact here. And I always say it's a timer. Once we found honey contaminated, I'm sure the media will be #1 to start looking and publishing this one and say honey contaminated with some chemicals being used by beekeepers. We have done it to China. They had antibiotics in the honey around 2000, I believe, 2004. The honey, Chinese honey stopped from coming to the United States. Honey prices at the time, it used to be 75 cents. It went all the way to $3.15. And that's because of the contamination. The good thing here, how much of our honey we are really paying attention to and monitoring, I cannot really answer this question. It's very questionable. So in reality, we are trying to contain and maintain the trust of our consumers based on our own behavior in terms of how to keep the bees. So yesterday we talked about we have to identify the pest. We talked about monitoring. and we talked about taking actions. We talked about, again, the monitoring, and that's where to start. So for IPM, or proactive beekeeping, that means you have to be intelligent in one thing. Look at your cost of monitoring and applying the product to the hive, but look at the cost of your business. If you are supplying your honey, some stores, or you are going to the farmer's market and somebody will know your honey is contaminated or start something, how many of your clients will come back? We always ignore that part of the cost because we trust the market all the time, but that should be added to your business as part of your risk. So overall, we have to look at the long-term benefit. Unfortunately, too many beekeepers right now at different levels, it depends where you are coming from and what level of or number of hives they have. Unfortunately, they are looking for short-term gain. But we need to think about the big picture, how we maintain our business for the long term. So we talked about, I have some people who have been talking to me about, what kind of options we have. I mentioned some early on, but I like to add a little bit more, and hopefully I can answer some questions here. There's several options. I'll go through them here. Quarantine and eradication. That's the first thing. Any country has the privilege. They can stop any importation of any animal based on health risk, regardless. In 1984, once the tracheal mite was discovered in Texas, for the first time it happened in the United States, they had quarantine. No bees can move to California unless it is tracheal mite free. That's the year everybody understood there's no enough supply for the bees to pollinate the almond. And I remember at that time, the decision was never again. Yesterday I mentioned in Canada in 1987, we closed the border with the United States, still major fight between special group of interest trying to open the border. However, there is a system in place, what you call it risk assessment. Weigh your benefits versus your risks and look at the cost. But again, with a system like that, some people don't believe in it. Eradication, it can be another option, but also we have to consider other factors. How often the pest will keep moving from one place to another. Now, breeding. This breeding stuff, it's quite interesting because all of us, we try to promote it as the answer, which most likely yes, but also we have to be more realistic about what kind of breed of bees we would like to have. As a matter of fact, at the time, we tagged thousands of bees like this to select for tracheal mites. As you know, mites will move into bees within the first 5 days. After that, they will stop because the bees will smell like older bees. And we were putting the bees, exposing them here. Each color comes from different hives to the same colony, retrieve them back, dissect them, and look at the mite level. Some bees will have very high level of mites. Almost we found up to 120 mites per trachea. Some bees, they have 0 or 1 or 2 mites. And that's how we separated the two. If you look at here, actually, half of this work was done here in New York. And from 1992, if you look at the range here for between 0 to 40, we have some hives. They have scattered all over the place. Within 8 years, if you look at the range here, we went from 0 to about 1.5. We were able right away to make our younger bees smell like older bees, and they cannot recognize them. Actually, those bees will start foraging early because, again, their hormone system changed and everything changed. It was good at that time. But one thing, when we bred for this stuff, we did not overlook what you call it, the economic traits. Early on, I was sitting on a table for lunch, and I said, number one, every beekeeper I dealt with in this breeding program, they said, number one for Canada, how to get them through the winter. Because if they're not going to make it through the winter, there's no genetics. Number two was honey production, to make sure I make enough money to support my family. Number three, disease resistance. Actually, number four, since everybody's so proud of their bees, I said, that's your choice. Blonde, blue eyes, whatever you like, that's fine. And actually give them a chance, and later on, at the time in the 1990s, if you remember that time, so we tried to promote this one. Everybody has to select for his bees, and it became common. I mentioned at the time, because the test was quite expensive, and we got a lots of research money to support it, but we want to make sure our beekeepers also doing a good job. The queen was sold at the time in 1994 about $18. At the time, you can buy it from California for $5 or $5. But everybody knew the value, and again, it was what you call it, commercially acceptable bees. Now we start looking at, keeping in mind, by 1990, the Varroa mites came here, it moved up to Canada, and we start looking at hygienic bees. This is similar to the same system Marla Spivak developed, what we call it Minnesota bees. And again, use liquid nitrogen and expose the brood to the liquid nitrogen. The bees will come and clean it up. And we had some hives almost 90% cleaning within 24 hours. And we collected mites on the sticky boards, and you can see the red spot and the blue spot. And we were counting the damaged mites versus non-damaged mites. So the Russian bees also came. We tried to work with this one. Actually, the Russian bees, they showed they are hygienic. Ontario bees not selected, it was 50%, and we got the crosses. It shows it is inheritable trait. Okay? But at the same time, we knew now these are trait usable, but the bees still commercially available and being used. Later on, going back, my slide stopped here. We have VHS trait. VHS trait, actually it was an experiment. It started in Michigan and moved to Louisiana, and they were trying to figure out what kind of mechanism available to the bees to fight the mites back. So they discover, actually the bees, they do the same kind of situation. You know, the smart bees, they can take out the brood infected, and actually after they let the mites out, they can seal the cap back again and leave it alone. So they did a lot of inbreeding and to try to collect all the traits or the genome controlling this trait in those kind of lines. It turned out the colony, it can control the mites almost 99%, but the colony population was quite small and cannot survive by themselves because they don't make enough honey. So the experiment was solid, provided results. However, how to take this stock and make it applicable to the beekeepers to use it, that's where now we have hard time to do that. Either you give us some of the some of the resistance for honey production and colony performance, or not. So far we haven't seen a breed, regardless where it's coming from, Canada or the United States, to say it is resistant and it does not require chemical treatments or supplementary treatments to maintain the bees alive. And Jennifer was quite correct. With her trait, she's trying to breed and she work on it. She understands that rate can go that far, but we don't have that kind of situation to have mite-resistant bees without no chemical treatment. So keep this in mind, please. Why is that? Remember early on this morning, I talked about mites and Asian bees develop only in drones. So it's short time of the year. However, in our bees, in Florida, if you have 10 months of the year, they have brood, the mites will develop in the workers and drones. In Canada, if it is 6 or 8 months a year, they do the same thing. So in reality, our bees, as European bees, genetically, they are not really prepared for that. But because they are bees, they share traits. Some of them over the years enhanced in some lines more than others. That's why we have to accept the fact we haven't achieved yet. So no matter. I read some ads, bees coming from Texas, no chemical treatment, and the bees are alive. And once you investigate, you find most of these bees, actually they are African bees, and mostly they are hygienic. And later on, oh, by the way, that's stock never been treated. Kind of in a way, to me, it's good goal, and we should keep working towards that goal. And if we can reduce our treatment by 50%, I think we achieved something good. But we have to monitor and make sure it is right. Some other culture ways, and again, for some, I always encourage my beekeepers who had number of hives, manageable, and they can spend time with their bees. Even I call it babysitting their bees. That's a great opportunity, because anytime you add or do something to reduce the mite population, it's big plus for the bees. Less chemical to use if it's needed. So some guys are using this drone production combs, and tomorrow we're going to see some of those ones. Actually, this guy here cut half of the comb, the frame, and put in the hive, and the bottom half, this is drone combs. And he keeps cutting it and taking it. In the old days, actually, and I'm serious about this case, one guy, we used to recommend take the frame out, put it in the freezer for 3-4 days to kill the mites. You can put it back in the hive for the bees to clean it up. I know a guy was divorced because he was using the freezer in the house, and the wife kept going at him, and later on everything fell apart. So at that time I said, okay, how we can do this in a smart way? I'm sure some of you use shallow supers, and maybe the bottom brood chambers are standard. If you take shallow frame from the top and put in a standard, that 4 inches will become drone areas, and you can keep cutting it, okay? And you don't have to worry about how to manage or handle the stuff. At one time, we believed the screen bottom board, even 10% is okay and acceptable, but I try to encourage more beekeepers now to use it as monitoring tool, and we had the question early on, if we are using it as monitoring tool, you leave it for 3 days, count the mites, divide them by 3. If you hit the 10 mites per day, that's a threshold. And Jennifer actually added a good point here. That threshold, maybe in early spring, is different from the middle of summer. It's different from the fall. But dealing with my beekeepers, everybody likes to stick with one number. So at least to give them guidance, so they know where is that. So we talked about this miticides. Now we come into this benign chemicals, very popular, because it's organic stuff. When I was working with organic acid, formic acid, to develop this product, actually we got some results. They are quite nice. Later on led into Max, which most of you already knows how to use it. But one of the things which I found out, lots of beekeepers were not taking care of themselves. Actually, including myself, first time I did the experiment, And I had this jug, 1 gallon, with formic acid, and I was sitting down on my knees, and I'm trying to measure about 40 mils, and formic acid, I had burned here actually. I had a slide, and I showed and say, look at this idiot, and that's actually my leg. And again, we like to save our bees, but believe it or not, if you save your bees, and at the end of the day, if you are not taking steps to protect yourself, who's going to enjoy the bees if you get sick? So whenever you use any chemicals, regardless, whatever out there, make sure actually to wear all the protective clothing and follow the label, because it's made for a purpose. When we ask actually the government to register Epivar and check Mite, the guys from the human safety ask us, how many strips a person will apply per day? Especially when we said the average beekeeper in Alberta has 5,000, and if they are going to apply 2 strips, that's 10,000 times exposure. So we did all the math to make sure a person will be safe. No person can apply more than 200 strips per day, and that way it becomes safer for those guys, especially the ones that have big operations. So that's something I don't think anybody will look into that. Oxalic acid, keep in mind with formic acid, make sure you know the label and at what temperature it's being used. For the essential oils, we have here Epilife Var. In Canada, we call it Thymovar. It's a similar product, and it does work, but also again, we have to be careful at what time of the year and what dose. Oxalic acid is being used too. How many of you already used oxalic acid? Liquid, okay. Evaporation, I know Erin does. How many of you guys interested to apply it and use it as part of your operations? Okay, that's, I think, although the oxalic acid is being registered here recently and lots of excitement, definitely it's a good product. But keep in mind, this product works only on mites and bees. But in most of the time, unless there is broodless time, lots of the mites are inside the brood. So we have to be aware of that. Early on, when I did some work actually, we had, this is a 3.5, that's the concentration being recommended right now. We can get 85%, almost 90%. We use this one, Epilife Var, actually gave us at the time 65%. We were using a formulation of formic acid, it gave us about 93%. Ipstan, believe it or not, in 2000, in some location, which we had 95%. However, right now, when I test my mites up where I'm at with Ipstan, the efficacy about 40%. After 8 years of not using it. In 2002, the Ipstan efficacy was 18%. So it's recovering. So, with this experiment here, again, we tried it, and at the time, you notice here in Ontario, guys, they got about 92%, 83%, or 85%. However, in New Jersey at the time, I got only 35%. Even though it's about 8 hours drive between north and south, the season was entirely completely different. Down there, the colonies were still building up, lots of brood, most of the mites got protected. So that tells us each location, it has different situation. I showed early on about what are the treatment times. You notice here, I put this one purposely because early on, even until 2006, we were always focusing on our treatment in the fall, but now we moved it up here, and we moved the formic acid down here. However, if we would like to help our bees in terms of using the cultural method or genetics, this is the time we make more splits and use resistant stock, but keep in mind, our resistant stock, it is not fully resistant, but still would require monitoring and treatment. And trichial mites, we are no longer monitoring it. It's too much, too expensive for too little information. We talked about termites here. And one of the things also we are finding, early on, we used to say the threshold, it was 50 mites per day. However, with the interaction with viruses and the virus load is becoming higher and higher, we start lowering the threshold for mites. So now we are at 3%. Sometimes you read it 2%, that's fine. 3 or 2% if you are shaking the bees, or 10 mites per day if you are using the sticky board. So why this system actually is not too popular? And this is what actually I've been going around the States when I get invitation, and everybody will say, Medhat, if this system is working, why not everybody picking it up? High cost. And the cost that comes mainly from monitoring, because that mental block. It's going to cost me money. Why not just I apply the treatment and walk away? But you're missing the point here about benefits. We try to maintain the product as long as we can, reduce the resistance, protect our crop. Pesticide companies, and I showed you the ads when they say it's 95% effective. You trust them, and you say, oh yeah, I can spend $4, so I don't have to worry about it. So that's some interest out there. Some guys, they get bitten because they never monitor, or they monitor and missed it, and later on the bees died, so now they are reluctant to use it anymore. As a matter of fact, it's quite interesting. From my experience up north, in 2006, 2007, I had about 30–40% of the beekeepers used oxalic acid because there was no other option. By 2008, as soon as we got the EPIVAR registered, now the oxalic acid users about 3%. So it's a matter of convenience. So everybody's looking for more tools, and that's why they think we can develop tools every day. But as I said, we have some other gaps in our system, like how to keep the mites alive or how to raise them. So that's really hindering our work and making very slow. One of the things also, beekeepers, a kind of breed, they don't like to share what they have. Anytime you ask a guy, how's things going? It's great. How's the mites? Under control. What did he use? Well, a registered product. So you have to sit at the bar until 1 o'clock in the morning and ask him that question. And then he will open up and say, well, you know what, I'm having some issues.
Thank you for all that independent research.
Are you going to put this video on YouTube? If it's going to go to Egypt, I'll be just... But in any case, yeah. That's the kind of stuff we have to watch for, okay? So, however, why it is successful? Make it beekeeper driven. And actually we used the ride when they lost that 40% or 75%, everybody, what it takes to get myself back in business. And at the time, take this jar and monitor. And I actually, at that time, they start seeing there's value in that. Now, I always say, if you want to go to now Arizona or Florida or Georgia for the winter, make sure that bees go into the winter less than 1% mites in the hives. Once he gets the results, he knows now he's okay. So make it flexible. Actually, most of this work, when I work with the guys, I have a lots of communication. We sit down and trust each other. I'm not out to police you. I am out to help you, and you are also part of the solution because you have to tell me what works and what doesn't work. Number 3, provide good IPM service, education, tools, training, like what you guys are doing today. That's the best thing. I always say the smart bunch of beekeepers who are attending a meeting like today, taking 2 days off, your family and whatever you're doing, sitting down to learn about even having one hive, how to maintain that hive. This is really a key. And I am seeing that all the time, more people are quite interested in learning and how to do it right. And one thing, create incentives for the use of the IPM. Actually, when I was in Ontario, I was so impressed with one lady. She started buying our queens from the fecal mite stuff, and she wrote actually on the label, she put a nice label and hang it in the jar, and it says, I am part of the IPM program run by Medhat, and we try or strive hard to make sure we don't use chemicals, but we are using mite-resistant bees. It made a really nice story. That we call it like 250 grams, I don't know how much here, say a pound. Everybody was selling a pound of honey for $6. This one, she was selling this a few years ago, even $12, because now everybody knows she's conscious about her product, and they start using it as a marketing tool. And that's how you develop the trust between yourself and your consumers. So I believe we have sustainability, we have safety, and we have stability in your market. So this is a long-term project. It's commitment. If you start in this way, and actually you make it as part of everyday practice, I believe it becomes very successful. One of the things I talked yesterday about it, and I'm going to share it with you today, working with my beekeepers, especially the guys from the cities. Those guys are computer savvy. Okay, and okay. No, that's fine. Okay. You notice one thing here. As I talked to lots of beekeepers, a lot of these guys, especially the urban beekeepers, they are 1 or 2 hives, 5 hives. They are more interested in keeping bees. They kind of educated, they have cell phones, they like to have the technology under their fingers. So I said, okay, why not we have a bee app? Actually, I got money to do bee virus, about $200,000. I went back to the funding agencies and I said, well, you know what? I would like to spend this money in education and we'll do a bee app. Look at me. These guys all the time, their fingers are sticky and how they are going to use. I said, well, actually you have a lot of time in their hand and at least to give them a tool. So that's how we started this one. Come on. So with the bee app here, what happened here? Yep. So this is, if you have Android or iPhone, you can download it. They call it Bee Health. And actually, because I have this open, that bee out here start running around just to give some action. And later on, we have here pest, identify pest, and information. The information here actually to give you what we call it part of the security staff and making sure we are not collecting any information about yourself. The government actually does not have any interest in this one. And we made it free. just to serve everybody. So far, we have about 12,000 downloads. And what we did here, come on. Okay, so now for the pest, you can see American foul brood bears, bee louse, black. So if I'm gonna go to American foul brood, we have some pictures. It shows you exactly what's happening there. And the robustness test here, if you look at description of disease, it gives you the description, symptoms, how to monitor, management, and even the chemical treatment. And with the chemical treatment, we put the labels out there. So you have the label for this product. One thing actually we tried again for each pest. I think right now we included 20 pests, common in Canada and the United States. Identify pests. I'm going to the bee yard. If I walk into my bee yard, I see some symptoms. Some clumps of bees, exoskeleton in the apiary. Any symptoms you see, just click this ones, and later on identify the pest. Oh yeah, view pest. You have bears. And these are the symptoms. Again, we are talking to lawyers. They said, Medhat, you cannot really identify based on your own thing, but you have to be careful and say most likely, or the possible one, skunk or bears. One thing also we try to do here, if you do that, at the end of the day, after once here's adult symptoms, and you have deformed wings, and actually if you pass right away, it tells you that's varroa virus, and later on, that's varroa mites, okay? One thing we added here, after you do that, identifying the pest, you can save it as report. And now we are adding new version, and with that report, actually you can email it to yourself. If you are Alberta producer, you can email it to us, and at the time we can provide some more recommendations and coaching how to identify the pest or what's supposed to happen at that time. But we give you the guys, the rest of the wallet, the leverage to have your own address, even if you send it to your friend. Or you want to use a camera to take some picture, you add it to your report and mail it to whoever you are seeking help from. So that's kind of the new addition should come out within a month, but it's always going to give you an upgrade, and you can upgrade it if you are interested in. So with our program, the whole idea, right now actually keeping records, that's a key one. Now we're trying to make sure the beekeepers, they move away from the brick recording of records in the top of the lid of the hive. You put a brick and come back next day or a week later and say what this was for, queenless or queen right, what's going on. We need to change that kind of culture. Okay, so I stop here, and if you have any question.
I have a notebook that I write down what direction my pricks are pointing. What directions my pricks are pointing.
Oh, you do? Make sure you also use the sun as a... All right. Yes. The best thing about record keeping. What's the best way to do it? I will not listen to Aaron. Frankly, that's what we are seeing right now. There's some expensive programs out there. Actually, I have some guys already started doing some programs so they can enter all the data. But these are what I call them managers running the operation from their office, and the field guys like the Mexican and Filipinos and everybody running in the field, and they collect the data. That's kind of in a way big business. You know the old days that 3x4 this library card, or 4x4 library card. If you get some tags and you have the lid right in the top of the boxes, put it underneath, open the hive, put the thumbtacks there and the card and pencil, and you write your information and close it back. And actually, if you go and you have some cards and you can collect at the end of the day, you need 2 queens, you need whatever, and that will be your homework for next visit. Okay? This is actually, I'm finding this is the best way, and I'm using it all the time because the bees will not have access to it or chew it. It's protected from the rain and anything. Just library card and put it underneath and pencil. That's the best thing. A notebook and this kind of stuff, actually most of the time it gets so sticky and honey and wax and everything. We kind of in a way don't use that, but for most of the beekeepers who are doing collection of information, they put it in this card. Sometimes now actually with the cell phone, before they go home, they take picture as they go along. That way they have the records in a different form. And that's what we found, it's really practical for these guys. Okay, any other?
I found that a little digital recorder,
yeah.
And I'll go out as I'm doing the exams, I keep a running tab of what I'm seeing, what I'm doing. Then I get home and transcribe that into an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, there's some other tools, but kind of in a way, it depends how much money you would like to spend.
I'm a little old fashioned, I write on my hives with a pencil. You know, don't just take notes on it, write under with a pencil, rag it, wipe it off if you want to get rid of it.
That gets pretty hard to search for.
Yeah, to me, that idea, stick, brick, whatever, all of these languages, it's no longer there because each time we go, we always try to figure out what did it mean at the time. So in reality, let's be real, especially right now, we know it's quite important to have some of this stuff, and believe it or not, after 2-3 years, if you put this data together and plot them in a graph, you will know exactly. For those people who are looking at dates, when to treat, or when you're supposed to prepare, you are going to create your own calendar from your information.